Hello and welcome to the new studio of the Subs Bench podcast. As you may have seen in the last couple of weeks, we've teamed up with Football Queensland to bring back the video episodes that we started 2 or 3 years ago. Over the course of this season, we're going to have key personnel, players, coaches, administrators on the show as our guests to get their unique insight, viewpoint and opinion on the game. Our first guest today is the CEO of FQ. It's Rob Cavallucci. Hopefully you enjoy it and tune in every second week, so that's every fortnight, for new episodes. Welcome to the Subs Bench.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
G'day.
Not a problem. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Oh, no worries at all.
Beautiful setting. Bit weird sitting at a table with people again.
Yeah, it is.
As opposed to what we usually do, but it's nice.
But yeah, it is nice. And look, we got quite a lot to get through with yourself, Rob, and
sounds good.
I think the position that you're in, of course, the head of football in the state, your position actually attracts a lot of attention, fairly negative attention at times. Does that sometimes become an issue for you, or is it just a case of, look, I got a job to do, we'll get through?
Well, it's an interesting question to start on. To answer it quickly and then get into some more detail, the answer is, does it bother me? No, it absolutely doesn't bother me at all. I think for a couple of really important reasons. The governing body and my role within it, it's not a popularity contest at the end of the day. There's any CEO or any leader for that matter, whether you're a football coach or whether you're the president of a club, your role is to make the decisions that are in the interest of the team, the club, or in my case, the game. And that's what I do every day. And as a consequence of that, invariably, people within the community aren't always going to agree with that, because they come to the conversation with a very different lens, very different priorities. And my priorities are very, very clear. Our role here is to govern the sport, administer the game within the regulatory framework, and we do that without fear or favour, and we absolutely don't make decisions for the purposes of being popular.
Yeah,
that doesn't enter the equation. We make the decisions that are always in the interests of the game. So, does it bother me? No, it shouldn't bother any leader, because it's not a KPI of mine that I have to be popular, but it is a KPI that I do make the difficult decisions to take the game forward.
Yeah. Do you think sometimes the negativity holds the progress back? Would that be a fair question?
Well, I guess it's an interesting perspective that I guess you asked that from, and in asking it, in some ways, I think you actually highlight some of the issues with not only sport, but in our case, football, and that is, where do we get this feedback from? So, where are you getting that negative sentiment from? Like, where are you collecting that anecdotal information? Like, I'm asking that in terms of, how do we break that information down? We go to the community, the football community, every year. Like last year, we got 15,000 bits of survey information back, which we incorporated into our decision making. Whereas if you ask a question about popularity, you're getting it from social media, or even worse, subsections of social media. Do you let those subsections of social media drive the sport? And the answer is absolutely no. Like, that's, where do we get our information from? We can't let those interest groups drive the direction of the game. So it's a question back to you guys as well. It's because having a debate about that is what do we look for guidance to drive and support the decisions we need to make? Do we ask the broader community, 90% of them whom are silent and just focused on taking the game forward and worried about their club or worried about their team? Or do you listen to the mob? And I think that's something that you can often go down a rabbit hole with and get lost in, about whether you stay focused on the ambitions of the game or do you get distracted very easily. So the team here are obviously very focused on taking the game forward and not being caught up in personal
Yep.
attacks or personal opinions, because they don't help anyone, they don't help the game. So if people come to us with constructive views and go, look, here's an issue with this part of the game and here's what I think we can do to solve it, the door's always open, for sure.
That also needs to go through the right path though, right? Like that's why clubs have their presidents in place.
You're 100% right, yeah. And that's why there's very strict protocols of communication within the game. So FQ talks to certain people only within a club, because those certain people represent the interests of the club.
They've been voted to be the voice of the club.
That's right. And what we find all of the time is that we'll respond to those elected officials within a club and put forward a particular outcome. And the very people within that club are the ones that then go and scream and yell at us on in a social media environment, when it was the club president who specifically asked us to do something. So there is a general disconnect between what are the interests of a club, what does a club want, versus what does the participant of that club want.
Is there too much emphasis, or is it from a participant's point of view, is there too much thought of my opinion is the one that matters? It's not, because obviously you're taking care of the participants, but via the clubs, right?
Yeah. Well, I think isn't that a societal problem?
Yes.
So it's got nothing to do with football. There's general issues across society. It doesn't matter whether it's sport or otherwise, whether it's school or whether it's workplaces or otherwise. There are always elements that are. It's all about me and what my opinion is the most important. I don't care what the club wants or the club president wants, or the region of Queensland football wants. My opinion's the most valid one. And so, without getting into the rabbit hole of those discussions, it does make putting forward a positive perception of the sport more broadly very difficult, because we have 300,000 people who play football in Queensland. It is impossible to try and make 300,000 people happy, and we absolutely do not attempt to do that. We just try and make most of the people happy by delivering the best outcomes for the game, and we focus on the things that are required to within our strategic plan. So participation growth, women and girls growth, infrastructure growth, government relations, all of the things that are very well documented. That's what we do.
Good. Yeah. On the participation piece, there's been quite a few posts on social media recently, but sort of since the turn of the year, about the growth in participation. Were there any specific markets that were targeted coming into this year?
All of it. So there's probably about 20 or 30 different metrics that we measure every year through a census process, and 2023 saw an increase in every single one of those metrics. So it was an absolute remarkable year for football, and this year, by all accounts, we're already on path to exceeding all of those. So those moving the dial on those metrics is really ultimately what we focus on. Football is extraordinarily esoteric, so it's extraordinarily complex, and I don't think there's an appreciation for how complex it actually is. It's a wide variety of systems built on other systems, built on other systems, built on other systems, and they all impact each other. And what we have to do is invest carefully and strategically into the right things, so that we can shift the needle in the things that matter. And that's ultimately participation growth historically, but equally now the focus of Football Queensland over the next 5 years, apart from key participation measures, is infrastructure. And we've had some great success with that in the last few years, and announced even just today was the latest infrastructure round funding from the state government, and we saw $8.5 million of that go to football. So those clubs will be finding out, over the last 24 hours that they've been successful, and that's a huge outcome. $8.5 million. Like, we've had more funding in the last 3 years for football than the previous 30 put together.
That's massive. But with the participation, and your metrics and whatnot, and your data, has that increase been statewide, or do you get to see that across the whole state, not just Southeast Queensland? Obviously, Dustin, myself, growing up in country Queensland, which is very rugby league dominated. How's the growth of the game looking I guess, further north of, say, the Sunshine Coast?
Excellent.
Yeah.
So it is varied, of course, because there's different factors at play in different parts of Queensland, but the results and the increases have been everywhere. Some are greater in other areas and some are not. Yeah. Parts of regional Queensland have different challenges, less to do with competing sports and more to do with, I guess, how they spend their recreational time is interesting, particularly in parts of, central Queensland and even North Queensland. So like they only like doing certain things at certain times of year for sport, and other things they like doing, things that, camping and fishing and all the wonderful things that you can do in regional Queensland that you can't do here. So the growth rates are always different. And I guess the ability for us to be able to tailor different solutions for different parts of Queensland is an outcome of a lot of the changes that happened with the recent reforms. We're able to put good investment in, but at the same time, it's tailored for local solutions. So growth rates are all over the place, but they're all going in the right direction finally, because that wasn't happening a few years ago. It was very static, if not going backwards.
Well, I guess sorry to cut you off, but I guess a lot of the negative social media feedback from Football Queensland would have been from those areas further north in the coast, because it seems like it's so Southeast Queensland dominated with all the sort of, I guess, the funding and whatnot, that I know, just still being in contact with a few people and seeing it on social media myself, there's a lot of people jumping up and down about, like, what about me? What about us? Like, obviously the NPL clubs like Townsville, Cairns, Mackay now, sort of not existing anymore in terms of the NPL competition.
The pyramid in general.
The pyramid in general, which I guess we'll touch on a bit later on. But
we can do it now or later on if you like. It's up to you.
Well, we can touch on it right now if you want.
It's your show.
Well, whilst it's out on the table,
we may as well. Yeah. So, I guess how's it all looking like in terms of? To me personally, I think the NPL's finally reached its market in terms of it's now the strongest competition in Queensland. It's unfortunate that those local teams, I guess, are no longer in there. But I do applaud Football Queensland in the end of season competition with the Champions of Champions with the FQPL. Gives those young guys an opportunity, because I know I'm no competition director or anything like that, but you can tell the financial burden of those, of obviously the federation and then those local clubs to sort of be involved in the NPL.
Yeah, and I guess there's a complex answer to what you've asked. When we look at designing competitions, it's say the NPL, for example, how in the past there was some regional elements to that, and now we made, over the last couple of years with the competition reforms, we made some very, very deliberate strategic choices, and that was to invest in conferences of football and build capability, build capacity, build technical outcomes in regional clubs within conferences. Because what happens, and what has happened historically, whether it's one of the several regional NPL clubs that have come into existence and then gone out of existence, is they haven't delivered on ultimately the strategic objectives of why they were there in the first place. And everyone can argue emotionally about having a team involved in the premier competition and what that brings. But at the end of the day, we have to look at it and go, we can't make football about one club. We need to make football about the entire region's clubs. We need to improve all of their technical outcomes. We need to provide more services to build their coaching capabilities. We need to allow more kids from the regions to spend longer in the regions building their technical capabilities, so that they don't think, when I get to 14 or 15, my only future in football is to move to Brisbane. Yeah. And in some cases, if you're absolutely off the charts brilliant, of course that happens. But ultimately, our ambitions are to not just have an NPL level competition in Southeast Queensland. We want a strong competition at a FQPL level in Central and up North. And to do that, we had to sever the ties and change where we invest and how we invest. And we're now seeing, particularly in North Queensland, in Cairns and Townsville, We're seeing clubs invest heavily in their juniors, which is where you start building that capability from. We're seeing clubs participating in the FQ Academy assessment process now in regional Queensland. That never would have happened before, ever. We've now got multiple clubs doing that, which is brilliant. So the intended outcome of the strategy is working. We had almost no kids from Whitsunday Coast and Mackay region in the state teams. Now we do. We have massive amounts of regional kids represented in the Queensland teams. Before, that just simply wasn't the case. So the technical infrastructure didn't exist. The academy system didn't exist. The focus was on one team, not five. That's where we believe we'll get better football outcomes for not only for the state, but for those regions. So ultimately, that's better for us as a code than having a team that brings in players from other parts of Queensland,
which was effectively a rep team.
Yeah, it was. I think it lost its essentially when we were growing up. The state league was an end of season competition where it essentially was a rep team. Like it would bring in some teams from Brisbane, like I know Rochdale and Strikers, Pine Rivers, and that when they were strong were involved. So essentially it was a rep team. So you'd have all the best players in your local competition, still playing in your local competition. Then at the end of the season, you get picked for the rep side. Unfortunately, when the NPL kicked in and QSL it really did affect the local competition because all your best players left, and then the local competition became a bit of a
it was completely diluted.
Yeah. So I do agree with you, like that sort of strategy. And I think on the surface, you always get that negativity of people jumping up and down. I know we would all love to see a strong regional team to include all of Queensland, but it definitely makes sense when you sort of pull the layers back about the foundations for especially the juniors.
Yeah, I think, but when you look at the FQ Academy carnival system, you have teams at all age groups, boys and girls, represented at those state carnivals now. And that gives every kid in those regions an opportunity to be identified and categorised, as the case may be, and go through the talent ID system for selection all the way through to 18s. Yeah. So that's now in place and functioning as intended. So it's, again, I think you highlight one of the challenges of administering football is there's a broad group of stakeholders who all have differing opinions, and there's you can focus on what the road ahead looks like with modern systems of talent ID and player development, or you can cling to the past. You can cling to, football used to be like this 20 years ago. It used to be like this. It was great when we did it like this. That's really not a way of administering the game, and we have to focus on a holistic strategy that considers a broad range of things, because it's not just the academy system, it's then how we're delivering coach education regionally. What does that look like? We've invested massively in there. We now have pro licensed technical directors in right across regional Queensland. We didn't have them 3 years ago. We have A licensed technical directors in every region. We didn't have that 3 years ago either. So it's part of a bigger system that now needs to work and through the passage of time, lift the capability of clubs and bring players through.
It's also like, it's got to be that much more difficult given that Queensland's such a big state. Like you talk about Victoria, New South Wales, even like regional clubs from Sydney or Melbourne, a couple hours drive away, potentially. Regional clubs in Queensland, a few hours flight. Talk about Cairns, that's what, 3.5 hours on a plane? Something like that.
Over two.
Yeah.
Bit over two.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a long way.
It's a big
state,
Dust, and they've got a northern New South Wales NPL is split in half,
and it's a much smaller state than ours. So there's only so much you can do, I guess.
Hey, who'd be the CEO of Football Queensland? Huh?
This guy.
Hey, there we go.
Rob, I'm going to get to a subject that if we were to have put out, ask Rob any questions, I'll guarantee that more than half would have been Squadi related. All right. So with Squadi, what issues, if you find any issues, what are the main issues with Squadi that people can't seem to get? Are the issues as bad as what people say? And are other states using Squadi as their tool for registration?
Well, there's a few questions in that.
Start with the first one. What are the issues?
Yeah, I'll start with the first one. Like anything, it's change. So that's fundamentally issue number one. Is it's change from an ecosystem of fragmented systems that have been in place for a very long time.
Yeah.
So whether it's game day, whether it's play football, whether it's scheduler, and there's a broad range in between all of that, that weren't integrated, but people were familiar with. And the longer someone was at a club or as a club administrator, the more familiar they are. So the more habituated they were to those systems.
You get used to something.
Very used to it. So more likely to be resistant to change. So those systems that had been failing football for a very long time. They were not just failing us, they were holding us back. They were an anchor around the game. Not only Football Queensland, but every member federation was being paralysed by it. So there's been national change and movement in of a wide variety of these systems. But ultimately, our objective with whatever platform needed to be chosen is we were looking for two things: a system that allows us to transform the way we manage football as an organisation, and secondly, transform the way that clubs manage themselves. And to get those two outcomes, we wanted or required an integrated system. So something that brought together all elements of football into one platform. So from fixturing competitions, from scheduling referee appointments, from paying and purchasing for whether it's apparel or whether it's canteens, every part of football or activity within football, we wanted to have it integrated into a single platform. Because football and how it's managed is highly resource intensive. So the more complex and the more services, the more resources are required, the more expensive it becomes to manage. And the more that happens is puts upward pressure on fees. We obviously don't want that. We're trying to put downward pressure on fees. So we needed a system that allowed us to do that. And working with WSA gave us that opportunity. Now, we can talk about how that was implemented, and there can be many people who have a detracting position on that. But the environment that it was implemented was very complex because it wasn't just involving ourselves, it was involving Football Australia, it was involving other platforms. Those platforms were failing around us.
They're the other systems.
That's right. So they were failing around us at a time when we were trying to transition to a new system. So the information that was coming from Play Football was rarely accurate. The profiles, the player profiles, all of those things were coming across from that system in a fashion which was almost impossible to deal with, and it was paralysing. So the very reasons why we needed the system were still plaguing us once we'd moved across. So our ability to transition was extremely difficult. There was no escaping that, though. So we couldn't pick a better time that somehow that was going to be better, because that environment still exists.
So forgive us, I'm not someone who does the registrations at clubs, is that. So when Squadi came in, there were still other registration tools being used. At that point, were you able to just say, right, this is Squadi, everyone has to go with this and this alone, or did there have to be some kind of room for manoeuvre because it was?
Yeah. Are you referring to like between us and Play Football? Are you talking between clubs and other systems?
Yeah.
Look, that's an interesting question. So that itself also posed another layer of complexity.
Yeah.
So we were trying to obviously develop a transition from Play Football to Squadi, but at the same time, a small number of clubs, about 10%, use third-party systems, and they have for some years. that equally caused and still continues to cause a great
issue,
a great amount of problems across the platform. And to sort of unpack your original questions a little bit, what are the issues? And I put it to one, primarily it's change of process, change of system, change ordering of how we do things and why. But ultimately, we analyse very carefully the support requests that come into Football Queensland, the volumes, every single granular detail you can think of, because we look at it to try and determine what's actually going on with the platform. And the reality is a large volume of the current challenges that we face come from 10% of clubs.
Yeah.
So that's the reality. That's and when I'm talking large volume, I'm talking 80-90% of all issues come from a very, very small number of clubs.
Yeah.
So that presents, a very clear position that the broader platform itself. What's that?
Are they fighting against it? Is that why the problems are coming from those clubs? Or you only use information you put in?
What their motivations would be might differ from club to club. So
okay.
without I don't have enough of a reason or an understanding of why some of them do it. I do know why some do it, but why all of them might do it, it's just familiarity and lack of resources to fully adopt it. But clubs who have fully adopted it as intended, as recently as a couple of weeks ago to a club meeting, just said we've fully adopted it end to end. We've had absolutely no issues whatsoever since doing it. And the challenge is that we take on the feedback of all clubs who want to put forward what their concerns are, what their challenges are. We look very, 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 very carefully at the support tickets. We track everything. But the volume is very much contained to a small number. And that does, present a particular, very clear point of view, is that the issues, 95% of those issues are operator error.
Yeah.
I was going to say, out of that support request you're talking about, how much of it was user error, because there's a lot of, let's be honest, there's a lot of technical dinosaurs still getting around who would run their lives off a pen and paper. Why are you looking at me
when you say that?
But it's whether it's user error or otherwise, it still represents a challenge for the game, because it spreads a broad range of negativity across the platform and its use. It makes onboarding new clubs and new people more complex because of their understanding. But it's a challenge between new systems and old systems. And we're trying to transition clubs to new ways of operating that are in line with a more modern, dynamic and agile system where there's greater transparency, greater accountability. And those things scare some. They scare some people and they scare some clubs. And that's the reality. But we have to work with them to sell the benefits of why you would transition to this environment, because it's not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. And we're in it. Last year, we developed over 200 modifications to the system. This year will be similar. We've got a very, very clear journey that we're going on with technology and why. And it can either paralyse an organisation when you get it wrong, or it can, in the case of many companies out there, can unlock incredible amounts of opportunity. And where we're seeing it deployed properly, that's the outcome. So that's something that we have to work with clubs with in the coming 6 to 12 months, and have them better understand the benefits when it's used as intended.
Is it, and look, I might be being naive asking the question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you not, if you know that the issue is that certain clubs, say 10%, are using another system alongside Squadi, and that's where the problems are you able to just basically put it out there and say, from 2025, you're not using any other systems, it has to be this one. This is the problem. Just use that one, it'll be fine.
Look, that's entirely possible, and it's absolutely one of the options that are in front of us. We haven't made that decision just yet, but I think what you've sort of flagged as being an issue is clubs are duplicating, if not triplicating, the amount of work they're doing by running duplicate systems. And not only are they triplicating the resource load on their volunteers, they're actually making it more confusing for their participants and players, who are then having to re-register back into Squadi in an environment which doesn't match the original place they registered in. So they're registering to the wrong products, they're registering to the wrong competitions, and then they're deregistering. The whole thing is a circus.
And that participants having issues as well, right? So they're complaining.
And then the participants having a terrible time and complaining. And then there's refunds, which then overload the system here of us having to process refunds. So that outcome in the ecosystem is not good for anyone.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with those amount of user error support tickets, it creates resource burden in this organisation, which you're then not able to service properly, adding additional cost, when the very intent was to streamline and integrate.
Take the pain away.
Take the pain away. So the pain's been taken away from a lot of clubs and it's working effectively, but we obviously have more work to do in working with the clubs who still have a desire to use other systems.
Yeah.
And I bring it back to a point I made earlier. It's you have an environment where you've had the same administrator at a club for 10 to 12 years, 15 years. They don't want to change.
Yeah.
So, and that's very difficult to do. So it's very difficult to work through that process, but it's something that we have to do. So at the end of the day, this is the system that we're using to progress the game. It will evolve, and it's evolving monthly, perfectly in line with I guess our development agenda, and as that unfolds, more and more clubs will see the benefit. So,
speaking of people seeing the benefit, how many other states use Squadi at this moment in time, and are any transitioning to it? Or
absolutely. So Northern New South Wales, which you mentioned, use it. Football West use it. There's zones and associations in New South Wales who use it. I think you'll find in the next few weeks another significantly large member federation will start using it as well. It will ultimately represent the bulk of the states and participation in Australia, but it's also the same platform is used by all of netball in Australia or basketball in Australia.
I was going to say I've seen like a few other.
It's the same. So it's across most of the major codes, albeit for a different sport. But also it's the platform is probably going to be the largest system in the US as well. So globally, it is the benchmark system, and there is no equivalent for a number of different reasons. But for us, most importantly, it's what does it mean for our ability to transform how we operate. That's the key to unlocking value, and that's what's coming in the weeks and months ahead.
Tell me if this isn't a question that should be asked on here.
But, can ask any question.
Because with Squadi, the only time I've used it is to log myself in as a player. I've used it from an admin point of view, so I don't know. But are there any benefits, say financially, to clubs to not use it, to stick to what they're doing, to potentially keep information?
Financial benefits of not using it?
Yeah.
Well, of course there is.
As in to hide information potentially and save themselves from having to.
Well, I think that's another issue. That is a very real issue, and it's an unfortunate one that a small number of clubs don't register their players in line with the national regulations and FIFA statutes and licensing and affiliation. So what that means is they're hiding registrations for a number of different reasons, and the rest of the football community is essentially paying for covering them. Yeah, for the costs of the game aren't borne by all of its participants. It's only borne by those
who are doing the right thing.
Yeah. So there are a number of reasons that are not always directly related to usability of the system, and again, we will be working with those clubs in the coming months about closing the loop on that conduct.
Yeah, 'cause
So-
it's hard to sort of force people to engage unless if there's a cutoff point or something like that, isn't it? So,
Yeah, so I just going to say it's a big claim that's I suppose the reason clubs are doing it, but
Yeah.
you've
we sent
actually
them just
got
to-
access to
Yeah. We sent a memo to
Yeah.
clubs only a week or two ago,
Yeah.
highlighting that very issue.
Yeah.
So we're putting it out there very clearly to say, look, we know this is happening.
Mm.
You know you're not supposed to be doing it. So it's not something that is sitting in the subterfuge, not being talked about.
Yeah.
We are being
And
transparent.
the data's there too, so it's not like you're making uneducated claims or putting
Yeah.
memos.
yeah,
in
I
for
think
no
that's what I was
reason.
going with that
Oh, sorry.
big claim.
Yeah,
But so it's
the data's there.
it's
Sort of
the
thing.
data's there. You can actually see kind of what's going on here, and that I support. So that potentially is a reason why the system's not working, because people are trying to get around it.
if there's so many participants, but then this many regos getting paid, it's pretty clear to see that not everyone's paid for, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, well, it's a matter of yes. So if you're a club with 1,000 players, but you clearly claim that you have 1,500 players, where are those 500 players?
Yeah.
And that's reasonably common in certain areas.
Yeah.
It's not common more broadly across the state, but some of the larger environments where that's absolutely occurring.
yeah,
So, and it's very visible and easy to see.
yeah, and potentially, I mean, clubs who are going to choose to do that, they're only doing damage to themselves, future wise, right?
Well, of course, but there's
Why
also
not?
child safety issues. There's member protection issues. There's public liability issues.
So they're not being insured technically if a player hasn't been registered through
We're talking kids as well, right?
the correct
It's-
channels. There's an insurance issue here.
there's kids and parents and anyone involved who is going to the club in an unregistered environment. So it's not just insurance. There's a whole lot of other risks associated with
Yeah.
that activity that everyone else is wearing the risk on that.
Yeah.
Except for the actual people doing the wrong thing. So there's a whole broad range of issues, but then there's coaching courses that are delivered. There's all of the things that are being paid for, but there's no corresponding registration commitment that's coming in order to pay for those services. So it really is doing a disservice to the game, and more broadly, I think it's doing a disservice to the customer experience. So because the risks aren't being accounted for properly.
All right,
So-
that's
Squadi.
Yeah.
that's Squadi.
But look, just to finish on that, I do want
Yeah.
to recognise it has been a difficult 12 to 18 months with the change of the system. There's no doubt about it. That comes with change, and for everyone out there who's had issues or who hasn't understood the transformation process. Of course, we're absolutely cognizant of that. We have been listening to the feedback. We do reflect on it constantly, and when issues come from an update or a bug or something that happens because of that transformation, the team act on it very quickly. But it's not; these processes aren't seamless.
Yeah.
And they are a journey, and that is absolutely one thing that needs to be said. We are going on a journey. It's not something that we just picked up off the shelf and said, we want that, and it is as it is. It was, we need this system because we want to evolve it to where we need it to be because of the direction we're taking the game. So I think that needs to be reflected on as well.
Maybe
Yeah.
everyone paid their regos, you can maybe afford a better onboarding experience.
Well, that
You
is
said it.
I said it. You don't have to.
that is a particular point of view.
Just the final thing on Squadi, because I know that when this comes out, people will ask us the question that we should have asked that. So just in a one word, a yes or no answer, was there a better way to roll it out? Yes or no?
I think no,
Cool. That's fine.
Done.
because if there was, I would have done it.
Yeah.
Done. All right. Okay, so we touched upon clubs who might not be doing the right thing there. I'm going to talk about Sunshine Coast Fire. What is the situation with... So Sunshine Coast Fire are no longer in the pyramid. They're not in QPR 1. What actually happened there? Because there's a lot of, I suppose, rumour, conjecture, whatever you want to call it. What actually happened in your own words?
Look, I think some parts of that will be difficult to answer in the sense that, I don't like to give specific reflections on individuals or clubs because it's, as a governing body, it's important that we don't do that. But if you want me to give you a general point of view, obviously from a licensed club point of view, licenses are offered for 1 year and 1 year only to all clubs. That's not unique to Queensland. It's the global system of licensing is 1 year. Those decisions around who are licensed can change year on year for different reasons. Whilst I can't go specifically into the reasons around the fire, their decision to participate or not to participate in, other competitions was theirs. So they were offered affiliation and rejected it.
Right. So you didn't kick them out of the league.
Are you talking about QPL or are you talking about more broadly the club?
QPL.
QPL. Yeah. So the license wasn't renewed for QPL.
Yeah.
But for all other teams, so across, potentially community football or any other football, affiliation was offered to the club, and they didn't want to affiliate to Football Queensland.
Right.
So if you don't affiliate to Football Queensland, you obviously can't participate in any of our competitions. Why that is, that's a matter for the club, and it would have been a decision that they made at the end of the day. So I don't know the reasoning behind that.
Yeah.
But their license for QPL was revoked.
Well, there's revoked. There's no
such thing.
There's no such thing.
It wasn't renewed.
That's correct.
By Football Queensland.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Lost me there for a second.
No. So just so that's clear.
Yeah.
So so there's no license is ever revoked. They can either be renewed or not renewed.
The federation decided to not
that's
renew
right.
their license.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and it's not the first time that's happened. We've obviously done that
yeah.
in many other circumstances because for a number of different reasons. Yeah.
Reasons we can't.
Yeah. So finishing off on that one, I think that's probably the answer that we need to be able to move on. Because we probably can't say too much else. Rumour might get us into trouble.
Unless if you know something that we don't.
Stick around for the uncut
version. National Second Division, there's been a lot of buzz about it for a couple of years now, but there's been a bit of a perception, and like most things, usually on social media, that perhaps FQ haven't been backing the clubs who wanted to get involved. Is that the case or not so much?
No.
Fire being one. Yeah, that was the main one.
Yeah, following on from the last question.
Segue.
Yeah, look, I think you, if we go back to opening remarks again about public opinion, social media, and the mob, there's absolutely no evidence anywhere, either that's been documented from Football Queensland, publicly, privately, or verbally, that we didn't support clubs. Like there's absolutely no evidence anywhere that that's the case. But again, someone on social media decides to spread a particular position because it's in their interest to do so, and then that spreads around as it does.
Yeah.
And it's just a lie built on a lie built on a lie built on a lie.
What would clubs what support would clubs be seeking from FQ? Like it's their, I don't know. This is just me talking out loud. Well, thinking out loud, rather.
Talking out loud.
I'm also talking out loud.
It could be public endorsement of their bid.
Yeah, but what's that going to do? Essentially, at the end of the day, it's the club's decision. It's the clubs that are financially going to have to foot the bill. They're not, Football Queensland can go, oh, we really, good on you guys, all the best. But what else? I don't know. What else?
But as the governing body, that process needed to be an independent process of selection and criteria run by Football Australia.
Yeah.
We're not going to come out and publicly pick winners for Queensland and pick one bid over another bid or endorse one publicly over another club publicly.
Yeah.
That should absolutely not be something that we do. And no one would expect us to do it. But certain negative sentiments were being deliberately disseminated, and it happens often in these circumstances where if a club's bid was deficient in some capacity and their likelihood of success was low, the easiest way to defer responsibility is to put it onto a third party. And the easy victim in this case is, let's just target the governing body. It's their fault that our bid didn't stack up. It's their fault that we're deficient in these areas. Now, I'm not saying that's what any of those clubs did specifically. It could have been individuals attached to those clubs. I don't know. But either way, none of those things are true. We absolutely supported clubs where we were asked to in certain ways. I spoke regularly to many of the presidents involved, weekly in some cases, to provide support to them when they would ask us questions, and proactively engaging with Football Australia to provide the right contextual reflections on each of those clubs. So we were enormously active in the assembly of the national second tier model. We were working on in working groups with Football Australia for the 2 years leading up to it. Enormously proactive and strongly supportive of a national second tier. So the suggestion that somehow we were roadblocking some is just an absolute nonsense argument that's not supported by any evidence whatsoever.
Just to double down on that, I'm kind of in that email trail at Power at a high level for that kind of conversation. 100% Football Queensland offered whatever support was required for our bid, and in the end, ultimately, we didn't end up, going to the next stage. But it certainly wasn't for the lack of support that yourself and Football Queensland give. So I will go on record and say that.
Yeah.
It's a social media thing that we keep talking about. It's like it's easy to blame the governing body, knowing that if they choose to bite back in public, they're going to look like idiots by doing that. You know what I mean?
The easy thing as well. The easy thing as well. And I'm pretty sure that particular the first rumour, that one particular club that we may or may have already not spoke about, but the rumour came from a different state, a club at a different state, and that's where it filtered out of.
State that rhymes with Victoria, potentially.
Yeah, it might have. But that's where the whole rumour came from. And let's face it, on social media, we keep talking social media. It is a societal thing.
We're all guilty of it.
It's a massive thing.
But you're such an easy target, Football Queensland, in the current landscape where it's very easy just to throw stones.
It says landscape that if you do something well, you're doing your job. If you do something poorly, then it just gets the knives come out.
That's what I was saying. Like when you're the very first question about, do you struggle with it, or do you wish it was different? Like, does any part of you wish that you could do this job without social media being a thing?
Look, yes and no. I mean, the reality is I don't wish for things to be different. It is the environment that and the world that we live in. It's part of it, whether you like it or not. You can't wish for people to treat each other better. You can't wish for people to stop abusing referees. You can't wish for people to stop having violent conduct towards, under 18 female referees on the weekend. That it's disgusting, and they do it. We need to be strong on that. Equally, we need to be strong on bad conduct on social media, and all of us have a responsibility in changing the nature of the conversations we have about football. We need to make them more sophisticated, and the more sophisticated conversations you can have, the more you drown out that nonsense, because they just look like fools. And at the end of the day, the more sensible people having more sensible discussions, that's where I think we need to go, as opposed to find ways of appeasing the mob. So have no interest in doing that at all. So it's not a concern around having social media and what it does. It's more concerning for me as to, one, how do we protect our people from it? How do we protect our referees? And then how do we lift the conversation to a different standard?
Yeah.
So that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, we are a social media. So
correct.
Well, you can use a positive as well, which tonight
we've
clearly is.
We've all been critical of Football Queensland, I think, on our show at times. It's never been, as you said, like it can step over the line and become personal. It's never personal. It's always like our opinion in terms of what we can see or what we hear around the traps. Once you get into the actual information, you start to realize, like, yeah, actually, no, there's a lot more to this. And that's the thing. It's educating, and that's what I hope that comes of this episode, is that a lot of people that maybe are outspoken with criticism can actually see, well, actually, there is a lot of moving wheels and issues within issues to actually run a whole state's competition.
At least get a bit of context, if not anything 100%.
Else. Yeah, look, and you're entitled to be critical of Football Queensland. Like, no one's suggesting that you can't be. The thing is that you debate the issues in a constructive way, and you open yourself up for different viewpoints about the issue, because not everyone knows everything about football, and working in an insular environment where you're just listening to the same voices all of the time doesn't take the game forward. So be open to criticism, which we absolutely are. But when someone comes to us and says, here are some ideas that I have about this issue here or this issue there, they're absolutely welcomed, and we welcome those debates. We welcome having any constructive discussion about football with anyone, anytime. But when you start playing the man, you've automatically lost the argument.
Well, I think
you have no argument.
That's the whole thing of a debate, right? Is there's always two sides. I can't stand people that want to have a debate, and then when you disagree with their side, it becomes ugly. And I think that's what I see on the social media pages within Football Queensland, not Football Queensland, but our sort of community, is there tends to be a lot of debates that go on. But if you've got a different opinion to me, then you become the bad guy. That's not what a debate is. So I think some people just need to pull their heads in at times.
Social media is. If you don't
it is, but
me,
like
wrong,
there is
everyone.
so many positives to social media if it's used in the right way.
Yeah.
Which is, you're never going to get that. But I think tonight we can have a debate and we can agree, disagree, get to the bottom of things, and we all just want the code to be successful.
And that's the whole point, right? I think our podcast actually started out, we just wanted, to share stories about end of season trips and cup finals, and
it's definitely,
and then
evolved.
Down the track, it actually, I think it kind of changed.
We've become slightly more sensible.
Well, we're more about a good product for the game, and I think a chat like this tonight, whilst we could easily come in with a particular viewpoint, we have to come in very open minded and say, well, look,
I think that's the beauty of what we've got, is we don't have an agenda.
Yeah,
we're pretty open minded, and we like to chat about football.
Yeah, and three of us will disagree at times.
Yeah,
we'll all have different opinions. That's
all
fine.
Yeah. We always disagree with Ben. Always.
Yeah. You two always disagree with me, but
that's just bullying.
Yeah, exactly.
Take it to the HR manager.
Just on the social media one, I do have a question. The Twitter spat, fallout, disagreement, debate, whatever you want to call it, with Scott McDonald, do you regret that going public? Would it not? You can answer that straight away. But the follow-up, I suppose, would it not have been better to invite him in for a chat? So look, let's work through what the issues are, or
it's an interesting question. Where do I start with that? Look, I think the describer of it is probably a little bit over the top, in the sense that it wasn't a spat. It was, Scott made a comment and I made one response, and that was the end of it. And for a number of different reasons, I chose to engage with him because we talked about the benefits. I'll come back to that in a second. We talk about the benefits of social media and the negatives. One of the benefits is that anyone in football, in my case, can engage with me on social media. And that happens often. Someone will put forward a constructive question and I'll respond constructively. In other cases where someone else in a position of seniority within the game says something that's incorrect, as the CEO, I should have an opportunity to correct them as well.
Yeah.
So we can argue, I think we can argue how that occurred and why. But at the end of the day, the way that I responded, I thought was bland enough, and potentially some would have seen it as in different ways because they cast a particular lens over either Scott or myself.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, nothing came of that.
Yeah.
There was no other follow-up discussion. There was no meeting of sorts. There was no, for me, animosity between him or myself.
Yeah.
So do I regret it? The answer is no. I mean, because I'm entitled to stand up for the game if incorrect positions are being put forward. I mean, I think I should ultimately correct those circumstances, and particularly whether it's a journalist or a commentator or whoever's prominent within the game, that should be something that you would expect from a CEO.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my particular point of view. I mean, we could. I'm sure you guys probably disagree with that, and go.
I just look. My personal view on that would be, it could have inflamed a situation that maybe didn't need inflaming. So that would be my point. That's all I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting with like taking it back. It doesn't matter, whether it's Scott or anyone. I don't have any personal grievances with Scott, but it doesn't matter whether it's him or anyone. I'd still probably do the same thing again, because if incorrect positions are continually perpetuated across the public domain, then individuals who aren't aware of the facts will continue to perpetuate falsehoods.
Yeah.
And we get into a circle of, like we talked about, the national second division position, where someone says one thing that's false and virally it perpetuates. So if you don't, in certain circumstances, put forward a factual position, then you do run the risk of potentially
allowing people to think that it was correct.
That's right.
Yeah.
People assume that it's correct, and ultimately, we moved on from there, and that's sort of ancient history. I do my best to engage in a way that is engaging, but at the same time, I try and find a balance of being open to discussion for those that want to put forward valid points and valid arguments.
Well, for people who want to have a discussion,
that's
chuck
right.
their opinion at you.
Yeah.
Just want to. I think we've probably gone through a lot of the bigger issues that people would talk about. So now just probably a few more that are a little bit lighter, but still discussion points anyway.
Sure.
I came up with an idea about 4 or 5 weeks ago on the podcast. You've heard it before, lads. Don't worry. The Kappa Pro Series. So we've seen a lot of blowouts at the start of the season. So your weeks 1, 2, and 3, which effectively form what used to be pre-season. They're now competitive games. A lot of blowouts between NPL teams and QPL. Now, my take on this was that QPL teams, by and large, apart from probably one this year, know that they're not going to win that competition. They're not going to get through 5 group games,
It's a pre-season.
quarterfinal, semi-final, they're not going to win it. So they almost look at it as, let's get minutes and legs, they change the teams up, because they don't want to go full strength and get battered and have confidence affected. NPL teams, by and large, think we've got a chance to win something here. So they go full strength, they get themselves ready for those 3 games. Your blowouts come because it's so mismatched. Now, I thought, look, if you could close the groups down from 6 to 4 and have more chance for a QPL team to get one result and spruik through, you might not get the disparity that you've got at the moment. So 6 groups of 4 rather than 4 or 6. Play them during the season, because NPL teams will be looking at who they've got on the weekend rather than pre-season where we've got a full week off. They're looking at Wednesday to Saturday. They'll even more out. QPL teams might go, you know what? Fancy ourselves this week. They're going to leave 2 or 3 out. They got Lions this week. I just think you might get far more competitive games moving forward.
Oh, it's an interesting point of view, and like obviously happy to take on board any and all feedback about the design and the construction of that competition. I mean, we modified it slightly this year.
Yeah.
To
Quarterfinals.
Yeah. To get more games. I mean, the intent behind that particular competition was to do a couple of things. One, to formalise, in a way, the pre-season environment.
Yeah.
And bring some structure to it. And at the same time, extend the number of match minutes played and the number of fixtures played during the course of a regular season. For NPL, that has to get up to around 30 fixtures. For us to, for a number of different reasons, but relating to sort of technical outcomes specifically related to the NPL, we need to get match minutes to a certain level. We need to get a number of fixtures played to a certain level. And that's across a number of different age groups. So it's critical that those two outcomes are delivered.
Yeah.
Now, how we do that, well, that's obviously something that we're still formulating the best way of doing it. So year one, it was a certain way.
Yeah.
We modified it a little bit for year two, but ultimately the guide is match minutes and fixtures. So the fact that it formalises a pre-season is a bit of an added bonus, but that's something that we would need to keep in some form. But
yeah.
If you guys have got a competition redesign idea, happy to take it on board if it meets those objectives.
I think maybe too, because it is early stages as well of the competition. We might see later down the track, years to come, sort of thing, like where the FA Cup or whatever in the European competitions, like the NPL clubs might start to use it as an opportunity to play their younger players, and then we might see some more upsets or closer games as well over longevity.
I think it's going the other way.
You reckon it is?
Yeah, because last year I would speak regularly to players and coaches from different clubs, and when the Kappa Pro, they were like, oh, what a waste of time this is. Yeah. We actually thought, let's try and win it.
Yeah,
and Gold Coast Knights took it seriously. They won it. And I think this year you're finding teams.
I don't disagree with that in terms of like any cup competition you should want to win it. In my opinion, like if you're there to play football for the right reasons, you want to win.
Yeah.
I think it's on the clubs. You're going to still get blowouts, but
you get blowouts in the NPL. Round one in the NPL, we've got a blowout with Gold Coast Knights and Wynnum Wolves. I mean, the thing is clubs have missteps, coaches have missteps. It doesn't matter what competitions. So I think at the end of the day, it's a great opportunity as well for a little bit of crossover between those two leagues, so that clubs within the QPL1 environment can start to better understand what is it actually going to take for us to progress into the NPL. What change? What's the standard? How do the clubs operate? How do the coaches operate?
Yeah.
There's an element of learnings for them as well, and it gives them a great opportunity to play regular football against a league above. So there's some really positive aspects of it. And there's also plenty of games where the blowouts aren't there.
Yeah.
So it's, there's a weighing up of what are the benefits, what are the negatives.
Well, basically you're saying that it's here to stay because those competition games have to get up. So we would obviously it's teething issue. So like what Benny was saying.
The alternative is, and we're not doing this by the way. We've got to get 30 fixtures, 30 games roughly at the NPL level. And you can do that by a number of different ways. You can obviously increase the number of teams in the NPL, or you can do what we do with the cup competition running contemporaneously with it.
Yeah.
We're not changing the number of teams in the NPL because 12 is the right number.
I don't think we don't have the talent.
Quality standard and talent volumes, because if you ratchet that out to 16 to get to 30, you're adding another 4 clubs, which
you get blowouts in the league every week.
You get the same thing
Dilute
happening.
the product. You want a good product.
The product devalues and we don't get the technical outcomes that we want out of the NPL. So it's not changing from 12. That's staying. That's fixed. The whole pyramid's staying at 12. That's not changing. That's fixed. So the alternative is, it's not an alternative. It was part of the strategy of going to 12 was to add additional cup competitions. So we're getting the match minutes. We're getting the fixtures. We're doing it without sacrificing the quality and the standard of the NPL. We've created another product. So the new competition itself, the Pro Series, is an additional product which can be expanded and commercialised. Again, all adding value to that premier competition environment. So there are reasons why we do it, but can it be enhanced? Of course. But that's some learnings. We're only in year 2.
Yeah.
We're also bumping up the games for QPR1 clubs, which also helps.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And games against good opposition.
From a coaching point of view too, Benny, like if you've got a big squad, gives you
It
opportunities to
certainly does help. But I just think that there's a better way to get it more competitive, that's all. Yeah. I love the Cup. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Speaking of more games, last year the top 4 became a top 6 with a day to go and created more games. Obviously, the situation around the whole, the reasoning for it, I think, is well documented. That one particular club thought that they might miss out, and there was maybe a threat that they'd take it further if they missed out by a point or 2. At what point was the decision made to go to a 6? Was it literally the day before, or had the plan been made a few weeks out that we might have to go down this route?
Well, the actual process itself was ongoing for months.
Starting in June, beginning of June.
That's right. So it was June, July, August, all the way through to September. So we're talking 3 or 4 months of a process. It wasn't something that happened overnight where nothing happened and then just before the final. So it didn't occur like that. So there was a set of circumstances through no fault of either club involved in those circumstances. And the way a decision was made, either one way or the other, put an advantage in favour or a disadvantage in favour of one club or another. And if you reversed it, the disadvantage was reversed. So there was no positive way of resolution where either club didn't have a valid grievance. So despite best efforts to work with both clubs and come up with an environment where a resolution could be achieved over those few months, the most logical solution that didn't impact anyone, no fixtures are reversed, no results were reversed, no one got changed in their order in the tables, but ultimately opportunity was given for all to participate in the finals through a top 6. It was a neat solution that gave a practical, pragmatic resolution to an unsolvable problem. And it's as simple as that. That took some time to work through, but at the end of the day, a few weeks out of the final series, again, the decision was made. It didn't impact the order of clubs within that final, within that series, within that top 6. But ultimately, neither club was negatively or adversely impacted.
Well, we were positively impacted because we wouldn't have been in the finals and we got in.
But you weren't negatively impacted.
No. And you had to make a call before that last day of the season, just in case.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Following on from that then, and this is more lighthearted, you don't worry about this one. When obviously the top 6 has happened and the finals have begun, deep down you got to have been secretly hoping, I hope none of these two get in the final. Like if teams 5 and 6 had made the final and even won it.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how the finals are constructed, whether it's top 4 or top 6. You've got to win the games to get to the finals. If you didn't win the games, then you shouldn't be in the finals.
Yeah.
So, and if you did win the games, then you've got every valid reason to be there. So it's an interesting perspective, I think, that only a coach would have. We had to win one more game, we had to win one less game. Whatever the environment is, at the end of the day, to get to the finals, you have to win the games, whether you got 4, 6, 8, or whatever magical number is there. But it was a temporary solution that was in place for last year only.
Yeah.
And we, as a governing body, we can't make decisions that are based on if we do this or don't do this, what is the negative sentiment that comes from it? It is we could have sat there and done nothing and just waited to see what happened. The reality is, he goes, no, that is the wrong decision. The right decision is that neither club is negatively impacted. Football will be played. That is the right decision. And whether that's negative to some, then that's, for us, it was irrelevant.
Yeah. And look, I think we can all agree that the fact that the top two teams made the grand final is probably the best outcome for everyone.
Yeah. And at the same time, everyone had a chance to earn their right on the field, but it played out that way anyway. So
for sporting merit needs to be the deciding factor, not not that particular set of circumstances. That should not have been the deciding factor.
I guess going on for
Great segue.
The top six, we'll talk about the grand final series for QPL, well, women and men, and NPL as well at Suncorp Stadium. On a little bit of negative, I think, feedback in terms of why at Suncorp Stadium. It's awesome for the players, don't get me wrong, but there was a little bit of grumblings around kickoff times, teams not being able to celebrate afterwards because of the turnaround of games, food, viewer, I guess, experience because of such a big stadium. What was the thought process behind the decision? And obviously it's going back there again this year, so it was obviously successful enough. And just basically, I guess, getting out anything that the general public wouldn't know about the decision, because on the surface sometimes it looks like Suncorp Stadium can't come cheap, and could that money be better spent elsewhere, I guess?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think from our perspective, our intent behind going to Suncorp Stadium was multifaceted, but ultimately driven by our desire to improve the quality and the standard of the product.
Yep.
So NPL and QPL, the environment that they play their finals in, we need to lift that product to a level that's, we think, commensurate with the league. So we can keep playing at, substandard stadiums that are, have some, romantic element to them, but ultimately the overall quality of that product, we're always going to be, hidden in the doldrums of the sporting world, or we can elevate the status to where we think it should be. And that is at the Premier Stadium in Queensland. So primarily it was lift the standard, lift the product, lift the experience, put the players in an environment that's unique, and start to build a spectator experience over time. So that decision was made to take that step. And ultimately we had, over 6,000 people come through the gates, which for us, we thought 5,000 would be a success. So we had 6,000. So we exceeded our expectations. It was on a Sunday because the Saturday was ruled out because the agreement that the stadium has with the Broncos and Rugby League. They have certain Friday and Saturday contracted in September to account for any possibility that the Broncos will be in the semi-finals and then potentially the final, not the finals, but on their road to the finals. So there's certain weekends that are booked out all the time. So because of our competition window, it had to happen on that weekend. So the only time slot available was the Sunday. So that's changed this year, where we switched with the Broncos. They've got the week after, the Friday, Saturday, and we've got the week before. So which gave us the opportunity to do it on the Saturday. So that will be an improved experience. Last year was obviously year one. So fitting 4 fixtures in is a monstrous effort, and the timing of that needs to happen perfectly. A lot of things right, but also a lot of learnings, which we've solved a lot of those for this year. So how we're going to have the post-game celebrations, we've resolved that. We've come to a position which we think will be supported by clubs, whoever's in it, and we're also working on a few other user experiences that will come into play on the day. So a lot of learnings. It was year one. So to put on an event like that was, you're going to get some things right, you're going to get some things wrong. But ultimately, we need to invest in something that we can build over time for the benefit of the game. And the people that were there, I think, had a fantastic experience. The atmosphere was excellent.
Yep.
And the numbers of people that showed up was, for us, year one was quite good. So we would encourage all participants in Queensland football to come to the grand final day, experience it as a football product. Watching it on streaming, whilst that's perfectly fine, you're not going to get the same experiences going to a game.
No.
And
is there any cap on the amount of people you're allowed to get through the gate? Like you say,
No,
everyone come along?
No, not specifically. No. So we ultimately secured the lower half of the Western stand, which you can fit 10,000 people in. So that was what we. It allows us to come up with a way or a solution of making it economical. So we're not hiring the whole stadium. You're not having to fill out the whole stadium. It's
Security
not staffing.
you're not staffing, not putting security out for the whole stadium. It's we got carefully selected one block, lower side of the Western stand. We got some corporate as well, but ultimately it made it affordable.
Yeah.
And the costs were covered. Yeah, sorry, go.
Well, that's something that I automatically in my head thought, "God, that's got to be expensive." But I don't know that. Like you don't. Do you think there's a benefit of putting? Not that I think you have to justify every. It's not saying that you have to justify every single. But do you think maybe putting some of that information public might, soften the
Appease.
the mob as you.
Yeah, but appease who though? Like same question. We go back to the start of the conversation: is who, any reasonable person, right, who loves football goes grand final day, men's and women's games, pinnacle of the year. Let's go to Suncorp and have a family day, or let's go for a day with the girls or the boys or whoever it is. You don't go, how much does this cost? Why are they having it here? Why aren't we doing it at another park? Like, I think the naysayers are we're not doing it for them because we could have the Matildas play there at the same time in a warm-up game and they'll still complain. And I don't think that there's we need to focus on improving the product that we have and do it for the broader audience that we're trying to build something for.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
Yeah, so
I do understand that point. I just think I don't know. I think who would probably be football. I've got two young boys now that I'm now having to pay registrations for, and it's not cheap. So I think some people's minds might go, well, there's a lot of money going into registrations. There's a lot of that money has to go to the federation, I would assume. So I think that's where maybe the gripe's coming from, where people go, well, God, they must have enough money to sort of.
Yeah, okay. It's a valid point that you raise, and ultimately, the event itself didn't cost Football Queensland anything.
Okay.
So there was no impact on registration fees at all.
Members.
And no, not at all.
Yeah.
So in terms of overall registration fees and the proportionality of registration fees on our revenue, 3 or 4 years, 2020, so 4 years ago, registration fee income represented over 45% of Football Queensland's revenue. Now it's in the 20s.
Yeah.
So our registration fees have been static or gone down over the last 4 years, and its representation of our income has dropped significantly. So we're trying to work towards an environment where we're not reliant on registration fees, because as the inflationary cost environment that we operate in, it's easy for member federations across Australia, and all of them do. They did it last year. They do it every year except Queensland. Just put up fees to raise revenue. We haven't done that, and it's not our intention to do that. So our reliance on registration fees as a proportion of our revenue has dropped significantly because we've diversified how we generate our income, dramatically increased commercial opportunities, which has completely shifted how we fund the game.
Yeah. I think there's probably, you talk about there's the educated lot, there's the mob. I think there's probably a group in between that as well.
It's the biggest group.
Yeah, and as you're saying, Tom, it's a case of there's a lot of people in that group who probably have those same questions, but they don't know enough to know that kind of thing. So maybe, I guess, leading on from your point of, would it help to put some of that information out publicly to appease that group, as more so than the mob?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I take on board what you're saying. How do you tell, as with the 1,000 things that we do each week? How do you tell the things that require, like, how do you know that someone wants to know how you're doing delivering the finals? How do you know that that's
correct.
it's
But
important?
I think that's why I think this episode could be very important, because a lot of these questions that we know that have been brought up through the football community are now getting answered. So you don't have to divulge all your information.
Yeah.
But for me, like, I'm not gonna lie, when I saw it first off, I was critical of it just because I thought, fine, well, who's paying for this?
Yeah.
But that's just me, as in, like, I'm paying registrations.
Yeah,
for my
you were
kids
thinking
now.
I'm paying for this.
But from a player's point of view, or like a club's point of view, I couldn't think, like, it would be unreal to be a part of. Like, I would have loved for it to be a part, like, 5, 6, 7 years ago or whatever like that,
Yeah.
when you're actually playing for finals. If you know you're going to play at Suncorp Stadium, maybe you take that final series a little bit more, because my opinion, if you finish first, that's it. So I
Finish
think
first, the finals don't matter.
yeah, but now I'm like, if
Well,
I was
that's a whole
player,
other argument.
Yeah, no,
Finals
it is.
is,
I don't
but-
think- I think there's a merit for both.
Yeah.
So I'm not one of those guys that says, "Oh, we'll get rid of the finals." Shut up.
Yeah.
Anyway, if I was in that position 4 or 5 years ago when you're in the semi-finals and you have an opportunity to play at Suncorp, I'm thinking, let's get Suncorp. That's just what I'm
You're
thinking.
devastated if you go out in round one
Yeah.
because you missed out on an opportunity to go and play.
Correct.
But also, we needed to show, though, if we're going to improve the standard, the relevance, and the profile of football,
Yeah.
if we're arguing for better infrastructure outcomes, if we're
Correct.
arguing for
Yeah.
better stadium outcomes
I do get
that
that point.
are more relevant for football, how do you do that if you're not actually
Yeah.
doing what we're doing?
If we're getting a good turnout for our national final series, then you can go to the government and go, look, this is what football's doing. Like, we need our own boutique stadiums, and which are
Pretty good segue.
oh,
a great
how
segue.
about
No,
these segues?
We mentioned subpar stadiums and the romance that goes with some of the local clubs and grounds. A lot of the buzz on social media, again, talk about social media, sick of saying those words, to be honest. But a lot of the talk is about Perry Park is the home. It's the spiritual home of football in Queensland or in Brisbane. Is Perry Park the answer?
Look, there's it depends on what the question is. Like, whether it's the answer. The question should be is does football require a more appropriate stadium that reflects its needs? 100% it does.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The game, we have enough content to sustain it. We have enough opportunity that's not future opportunity. It's actually existing opportunity to sustain it. The city and the state needs a football appropriate stadium that reflects football's very unique requirements. And the fact that we don't have one is symptomatic of 20 or 30 years of failure as a code to actively advocate for our needs. Now, that's obviously changing dramatically and very quickly. Is our preference for that to be a Perry Park? Of course it is, for a number of romantic reasons. But that could be it could be at Victoria Park.
But I was going to say, rephrase the question. Is it a redeveloped Perry Park that should be the home moving forward, or do we start fresh with something brand new? Or try to?
Look, the Perry Park's obviously got a lot of very suitable elements to it. It's in the inner city, which is perfect. It's on a train line, which is even better. It's on major road infrastructure, even better. So you can access it from pretty much anywhere and very quickly. And it links in with a broader, sporting spine on those train lines. So you can get from there to Suncorp, to the Gaffa, to Brisbane Live, Roma Street. You can get to all of those things from Perry Park, or you can get to Perry Park from all of those places. So it is in the right place. Having an opportunity in the inner city helps bring to life those urban areas in other ways, like going into the valley and then going to watch a football game, or going to watch a football game and then going.
Yeah.
Sorry, I probably got that backwards, but
Depends if you're playing or not.
Yeah.
Valley.
Yeah, I might go
Valley.
Yeah,
Who knows?
so
Drop in that Uber.
There's and there is an opportunity to fit the right sized stadium there. So there's no question it's been on our top 3 infrastructure priorities for 4 years now, and we're absolutely putting in significant work to eventually bring that to life. So it's important for the code, and it's important for not only this professional and semi-professional levels. It's important for women's sport, women's football, but also the A-League expansion as well. We should have a second Brisbane team. It will absolutely mobilise a broader fan base. It's something that can only be brought into life if we have appropriate infrastructure. And whilst we're based at Suncorp Stadium, it's unlikely to happen. So same with the national second team. It's unlikely to happen because we just simply don't have the right infrastructure.
Fair enough.
Cool.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, more or less.
Well,
I think it's
you can hit me with another one.
So
What do
just
you
to
wanna
follow
ask?
up, so you say you're working, behind the scenes, etc. Are you working behind the scenes to look at redeveloping Perry Park, or working behind the scenes to get a new location and start fresh?
Well, the answer is both.
So just whatever works out to be the best option is the one.
Look, there's both solutions in play, but ultimately the preferred option is Perry Park for a number of reasons, because
Locations,
the
fantastic.
location works well for a stadium of that particular size. But like anything, you don't want to be exclusive of any other options, because if someone says no to Perry Park for whatever reason,
And you've chucked all your eggs in
you
one
don't
basket.
have any other alternatives. It's not really the smartest thing.
I'd love to see it to be Perry Park, because the old 4X League days, like my old man talks about going to like all the grand finals being held there in the early 80s and whatnot. Pre-Brisbane Strikers, when it used to be the home of football Queensland, not so much just everyone associates Perry Park now with Strikers.
No, but it was the home of football Queensland. It
Yes,
was
correct.
From the 60s.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like pre-Strikers days, it was the place everyone went.
Yeah.
All the finals, all the big games were played there. I think we need that. We do 100% need that. So cup games, big cup games, the competition, the Kappa Cup needs a home. It needs somewhere where the younger generation growing up can aspire to play. Like, it's not Suncorp. You're not playing at Suncorp. They want to aspire to play at Perry Park, which is the home
100%.
of football.
Yeah.
So I'd love to see it come back to Perry Park, but obviously there'd be a lot of
and that is absolutely the ambition. But in order to get there, it's not always a linear process.
Yeah.
And to create a particular argument with key stakeholders, you have to prove particular points. And that is you guys kicking each other under the
Sorry,
table.
mate.
Dusty's just booted
I think I'm cramping up.
Oh, sorry, mate. You only played 60 minutes.
So
Again.
yeah, so it's look, the this process is not linear, but it's something that we're football people.
Yeah.
I was one of those kids who used to go to Perry Park in the 70s and 80s watching those games. So I 100% know what you're talking about. So because it's lived experience, and it'd be absolutely a dream come true from our perspective to reunite this particular organisation with its original roots, and that is to be able to deliver a home of football where it's been historically an institution of the game. So, but we have to do it very, very carefully, and we have to do it very smartly, and again, we do it in a way which is not necessarily reflected on social media.
No.
Cool. All right. I'm going to finish with 2 quick ones.
Yeah, sure.
We've covered quite a lot. 2 real quick ones. We spoke about this off air. Down the track, a potential loan system in the local game, and I'll give you the example that we gave before. If a club has had a young kid come through from even 6, 7, 8 year old, and they get to 18-year-old, good player, not quite first team ready, but you would think that by sending them out to a club in the division below, maybe they'd come back, they'd be a little bit wiser, more experienced, stronger for it. But we have to pay points in a PPS system, so you don't do it, and selfishly you retain the player instead of developing them. A loan system whereby those points could be move to one side. Is there any hope for that in the future?
Look, I think the answer is, whilst Football Australia will ultimately govern the delivery of any such system, that would be absolutely part of the ambitions of our ecosystem as it matures. Obviously, we've come into an environment in the last sort of 12 months with some of the transfer systems, the early phases of the transfer systems. A lot of that will evolve over time, as will borrowing of players and how that works. So there's always ambitions in the short to medium term to continually to progress our game's regulatory environment so that it reflects a more mature environment. And that means having the ability to loan players and do those sort of things. So I can't give you an exact answer as to when and how that will happen, but they're always part of conversations that we have with Football Australia about our system. And there are many elements of being careful with my words. There are many elements of that system which are currently under review and potentially modified in 2025.
Cool. All right. Good. And finally, I'm just throwing this one out. I haven't even told you as well.
Standard.
Magic Round. Possibility for a Magic Round in the future.
Give me an example. Like there's a few different views on Magic Round.
Well, one weekend, one venue or two venues if you want. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all the games in the NPL.
Definitely possible. We did think about it during COVID, and I don't think we ended up doing it. But
Probably the worst time to do it, getting everyone together.
well, it was
Spread out.
Everyone put your mask on.
it was. I think it was at a time when, it was a crazy time back then. We were trying to come up with different solutions to keep football going. But look, I don't see any reason why it couldn't happen. But we just have to get agreement from clubs.
But the home clubs would have an issue. They're going to miss out on a day.
That's right. So home clubs would give away a home game, and look, most codes do it in one form or another, and they do it successfully because you can try and create a product, people will come and watch it, and obviously there's ways of compensating clubs for that loss. So if clubs have a position that's something that they're happy to consider, then there's no reason why we wouldn't.
Cool.
So I'm not against it. So.
Oh, all right. Well, look, Rob, really want to thank you for being our first guest of this
100%.
particular series. Been really informative. Hopefully, the viewers will find the same that we found. It's a lot of questions that have been answered that you wouldn't normally
Otherwise
get.
wouldn't have.
Correct. And wish you well. Obviously,
No worries, thank you.
with the role. I know it's difficult.
Yeah.
And fingers crossed it's a good season for everyone.
Likewise.
Participation continues to grow, and
Likewise.
Thanks again.
Best of luck with the series, and I'll enjoy watching the rest of them.
You'll be the one hooking us if you do. It'll be all good.
Thanks, guys.
We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. It's a fortnightly video season, so we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another guest. But like, share, subscribe, do what you got to do, and thank you very much.